Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Draft Dogs YouTube channel. Today, I want to go over a brief preview of the AFC North. I'm kind of excited for this one. I'm a Browns fan, for those of you that don't know, lifelong, and so I'm very aware of the things that go on in this division. Um, I've been watching since before this division even existed. So, um, yeah, I'm stoked for this one. So, let's get started. We're gonna start with the Steelers since they won the division last year, and we're gonna start from top to bottom, and we're gonna talk about how these four teams have improved, how they've regressed. We're gonna talk about some of the draft picks. We're gonna talk about the things to watch for this season, and then I'm finally gonna give you my opinion, my projections for this year. So, without any further distraction, let's get into it. Okay, so starting with the Steelers, uh, obviously they won the AFC North last year at 12-4. They started out with, I want to say it was 10 or 11 wins, and then they fell apart after that. They lost in the first round of the playoffs to the Browns. And to talk about some of the things that they did this year, they added Dwayne Haskins, which is that's a really interesting signing because he projects a lot as a Big Ben type. He did coming out of college, so for him to sit behind Roethlisberger now, he's fighting for a roster spot. I think he'll get one, but we'll have to see how the preseason works out. Um, could he end up being the replacement after Roethlisberger? Who knows? I know something came out recently that said Roethlisberger may not be done after this season. So, it's kind of one of those walking on eggshells, wait and see games. But outside of that, let's see what they've done. So they lost James Conner, they let him go, and they drafted Najee Harris. Now I like Najee Harris. There's things about him I really like. Um, you'll hear in my AFC, what would it be, South video where I previewed that. You'll hear my opinions on Travis Etienne. Well, that's kind of how I see Najee Harris. Um, just a bigger back. I think he's more of an every down back than Etienne. But when I would watch his film, he doesn't have the greatest vision. He doesn't have what you're looking for from the elite backs. But what he does have is he has an elite skill set. And he has decent vision. But his skill set is fantastic. He's good out of the backfield. He can pick up blocks. He's an athletic guy. He's strong. He can get those extra yards. He puts effort into his runs. So I don't have a problem with that draft pick. I think they had other needs, but I don't have a problem necessarily with the draft pick. And I think he could have a good year this year as a rookie. That being said, here's where things really fall off the tracks for me. Marquise Pouncey retired. They had to let David DeCastro go. Alejandro Villanueva left, and you're about to hear he went to the Ravens, so within the division, and Matt Failer left. So they lost four contributing linemen. That is never a good thing. They did sign Trey Turner, which doesn't hurt, but they didn't do much in terms of replacing those guys. So, especially when you have Big Ben, who has been injury prone his entire career. He's been great, but he's been injury prone. Um, I would have liked to have seen the Steel. I mean, maybe not personally, but as an objective football, guy that I'd love to break this stuff down. I would have loved to have seen the Steelers do more in terms of the offensive line, whether that be through the draft or whether that be through free agency, something. I think that's really going to come back to hurt them. I really do. Other than that, they lost Vince Williams and Avery Williamson. They did just trade for former Brown Joe Schobert. But they lost Williamson and Williams. Those are big losses. They lost Steven Nelson and Mike Hilton. Those are big losses. I think the Steelers, and this isn't just the Brown in me. I think the Steelers got worse this year on paper. Now, are they able to overcome some things? Maybe. Maybe they can change up. So, maybe some of their backups that on the offensive line are better than I know about. Maybe they have some guys waiting in the wings at linebacker and in the secondary. Um, but I don't see a 12-4 happening again this season. So maybe I'm wrong. We'll find out as the year goes. Uh, but that's something to keep an eye on. So moving on, we have the Baltimore Ravens. They finished second last year in the AFC North at 11-5, and they lost in the divisional round. Um, Lamar Jackson got his first playoff win, which was a big thing for him. They went ahead and added Alejandro Villanueva, Kevin Zeitler, and Ben Cleveland, who I actually really like on tape. They got him, I believe, in the third round, and I think that's about where he should have gone. But I could have seen him going in the second as well. So I think that was a good pick for them. In the future, he could really pan out. Zeitler, another former Brown, is with the Giants. He's a great guard. Villanueva has been great with the Steelers. They did lose Orlando Brown, Matt Skura, DJ Fluker. So did they improve on the offensive line? I would say at any one position. They lost Orlando Brown. He's a great lineman. Say what you want. They lost Orlando Brown. However, they did get 3 very quality replacements for the 3 that they lost. So overall, I don't really think they're hurting as long as that line can gel. And Harbaugh seems to do a good job with that. So I think they'll be fine there. They did lose Willie Snead, but they brought in Sammy Watkins and Rashad Bateman. Rashad Bateman is a possible game breaker. That was a great pick for the Ravens. They brought in Justin Houston for a year, and they drafted Odafe Owe, who on tape he's one of those guys that he has great tape. You can see the explosiveness, but he just hasn't put it all together. So we'll see if the Ravens can do that with him. They added Sean Wade, who was late in the draft, who at one point last season was projected to be a first-round pick. Ohio State moved him to the outside corner, and it was a disaster. But I think Sean Wade projects more as a safety, and I think that's what the Ravens are going to do with him. If that's the case, they could have gotten a steal in him. But no matter how you look at this is a very Baltimore Ravens. It was a very look, you have 4 draft picks right there that I personally expect, and I could have added a couple more, but 4 that I fully expect to make an impact this season. It's a very Baltimore Ravens thing to do. They added on the offensive line. They have a stable quarterback. They have, now the thing with the Ravens, they've been looking for that number 1 receiver for a long time, and they haven't been able to get him. Do they have that with Rashad Bateman? We shall see. They did lose Ngakoue and Judon. Ngakoue is not as big a loss. He was only there for a very short, brief period. Judon's a loss, but, we'll see how they do by bringing in Houston and Owe. So, moving on. We have the Cleveland Browns, who finished 3rd in the AFC North last year at the same record as the Ravens, 11-5. Obviously, the Ravens had the tiebreaker. The Browns beat the Steelers in the wild card round, and they lost the Chiefs in the divisional round. So this has been a really interesting offseason for the Browns. They lost Olivier Vernon, Sheldon Richardson, Larry Ogunjobi, and Adrian Claiborne, all off of that defensive line. They lost B.J. Goodson at linebacker. They lost Terrence Mitchell, Carl Joseph, Andrew Sendejo, who I don't think any Browns fan will complain about losing, and Kevin Johnson, who I thought was pretty decent. They let all of those guys go. They completely overhauled their defense. Completely. So let's break it down a little bit. They let Terrence Mitchell, let him go. Carl Joseph, Sendejo, Kevin Johnson. They replace those guys, with John Johnson III, Troy Hill, and Greg Newsome. On paper, they improved their secondary big time, and they're getting Greedy Williams back this season to go with Denzel Ward. They have Ronnie Harrison. Grant Delpit was injured all of last season. On paper, with him coming back, and they drafted Richard LeCount out of Georgia. On paper, the secondary should be much better. It was awful last year. It should be better this season. We'll see how that goes. There's never any guarantees. If we look at the defensive line, they let Olivier Vernon go, who unfortunately got a season. He had a season-ending injury around the end of last season, and it was pretty severe. So the rumors are saying that he may come back around the end of the season to some ball club, maybe the Browns, maybe somebody else in need of a rotational guy. We'll see how that goes. Sheldon Richardson went back to the Vikings. The Bengals signed Larry Ogunjobi, and Adrian Claiborne, I believe, remains unsigned. They let all of them walk. In return, the Browns go out. They signed Jadeveon Clowney to essentially fill Olivier Vernon's shoes. They signed Malik Jackson from the Eagles. Andrew Billings, I put him on here. They didn't sign him, but he didn't play last year after they signed him to a one-year contract. So he's never played a down for the Browns, but he opted out last year for the COVID-19 opt-out. He was one of those opt-outs. So this will be his first year. Then they draft Tommy Togiai out of Ohio State, who's an extremely strong man. He was the strongest man in the draft if you go by the reps, right? So they're clearly looking for something different. When you look at Billings and you look at Togiai, those are two massive men who are very strong in the middle. By letting Ogunjobi and Richardson go, it's pretty apparent they wanted guys that are gonna clog, however you want to say it, that middle of the defensive line. And then they have Malik Jackson in there, who's a veteran. He's more the pass rushing style defensive tackle. So they're kind of covering all of their perimeters on that. So overall, on paper, they improved the defensive line. Outside of maybe defensive tackle, that's my biggest area of concern on this defense. They overhaul the entire secondary, and then linebacker. They let B.J. Goodson go, who played mostly in the middle last year, and they signed Anthony Walker from the Colts. And from what they're saying, he's supposed to be the actual play caller on defense this season. And then they go out and they get an absolute, in my opinion, steal with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. And the thinking behind that draft pick is you have two reasons. You have 2 games this year that are going to be like 2 games last year against the Ravens, where you have Lamar Jackson. They need a guy that can mirror Lamar Jackson. Owusu-Koramoah, a guy who's projected that he could play linebacker or safety, somewhere in the middle, has great speed. He may be a guy that could do that. You also had in the playoff game last year, the Browns had a chance to get the ball back against the Chiefs and let Chad Henne run for, 12, 15 yards, whatever it was. They needed speed on that defense, and they got that with Koramoah. So overall, they completely overhauled that defense. So we'll need to see how that works. If they can gel, it's a big if they can. That defense has a lot of potential this year. They have a lot of talent, have a lot of money in it. So we'll see how that goes. I did add a 6th round pick, running back / wide receiver, Demetric Felton out of UCLA on here. He was already an interesting prospect. After the first preseason game, you could kind of see how the Browns are going to use him. Similar to what I've said about Travis Etienne and not so much Najee Harris, more of Etienne. I believe he's going to be more of an H-back role, Percy Harvin style. It looks like they plan on using him a lot at slot receiver, and they're going to line him up at running back as well. So we'll see how that goes this season. But for time's sake, let's move on. And we move on to the Cincinnati Bengals, who finished last in the AFC North last year at 4-11-1. It's been an interesting offseason for the Bengals. They let a lot of guys go that have been there for a long time. They let Giovanni Bernard, they let him walk. A.J. Green, he's been a staple there as long as Julio Jones was a staple at Atlanta. He's gone. He's with Arizona now. They let Bobby Hart go. Alex Redmond's gone. Carl Lawson they let walk. That one kind of stunned me. Marcus Hunt is gone. Bynes is gone. They let Mackenzie Alexander go after a year. William Jackson, LaShawn Sims. They go out. They sign Riley Reef to kind of replace Bobby Hart. And I think they made a really solid pick in the second round with Jackson Carman out of Clemson. He looks really good on film. He looks like he could be a stable lineman. I think that was a good pick. Where they lose Carl Lawson, they try to make up for it by signing Trey Hendrickson. On paper, great pick. We'll see how he does here in the AFC North. They draft Joseph Asai. Again, great potential in the kid where they took him. They need to develop him. We'll see how he does. Larry Ogunjobi from the Browns. They bring him in. Geno Atkins isn't there anymore. They need a guy that can play in the middle. Obviously, very different style of defensive tackle, but a deep tackle nonetheless. They sign Mike Hilton from the Steelers. They signed Chidobe Awuzie and Ricardo Allen to replace the guys that they lost. Overall, I believe the secondary, I believe they may have got better. I like Mike Hilton. Awuzie's good. I believe they upgraded on the defensive line outside of losing Carl Lawson. I think that hurts. Offensive line, I still would have liked to have seen another higher pick to go with the Bengals. I know there were rumors that they were going to take Sewell from Oregon. They didn't. It is what it is. The big name here for the Bengals offseason is Jamar Chase. I could go on for 5 minutes, 10 minutes about this guy. All I'm going to say for time's sake is, had he come out 2 seasons ago, I had him as my number one wide receiver. Had he been able to and he had come out. I had him over everybody, including CeeDee Lamb. I had him over Jerry Jeudy. I had him over all those guys. He is a physical freak. And at LSU, with Joe Burrow, by the way, he was unstoppable. He was unguardable. Now, he did have Justin Jefferson there to help him out. But when you watch him go one-on-one against those corners, none of them could check him. They just couldn't. So if Joe Burrow is fine, if his knee is fine, because there are questions coming out of camp right now, like he's kind of, he's kind of, I don't want to say the yips, but he's got a little bit of hesitation on that knee, which is normal, but as long as he can get back to form, this is a team that should be drastically improved this year, especially with the addition of Jamar Chase to go along with the other receivers they have with T. Higgins. And I mean, they've got some talent. They have, they've got some serious talent. So we'll see how they do. Who knows? Maybe they surprise some teams. Maybe they win 7-8 games this year. It's possible. I think that's a little bit of a reach, but it's possible. So let's look at the things to watch this year. Number one is going to be the obvious question. Does Big Ben still have gas in the tank at all? And can he stay healthy? Because if he can't, I mean, the Steelers, they're going to fall. They're going to fall from a performance standpoint. Big Ben has carried that team for a long time. Number two, can Lamar Jackson take advantage of the additions of Sammy Watkins, and Rashad Bateman? He's, again, been given a lot of talent. Can he take advantage of that with Mark Andrews already there? Can he take advantage of that? Number three, does Baker Mayfield continue to progress? Does he continue to build off of his progression last season? If he does, the Browns have a chance to compete, not only for this division, but for the Super Bowl, and along with the Ravens. And we'll see how that works, but he has to progress. He's looking for a new contract also, so he has to progress. Number four, can the defense gel? The defense has to gel for the Browns. It has to. If they don't, they're not gonna do anything this season. They have to. Number five, is Burrow healthy physically and mentally? That's the key. Is he mentally there? Because if he's not, the Bengals are in a lot of trouble. But if he can click, if he can get where he was last season before the injury, they could really surprise some teams this year. And as Jamar Chase is advertised, I don't see how he's not. Personally, watching his film, he's a stud. But we'll see. We'll see how that goes. So as far as my projections and what I think from my standpoint, how it's going to play out, I think the Ravens still win this division. I think the Browns come in second, Steelers third, Bengals fourth. Baltimore, I think the Browns had a great offseason. I love what they did. And I think they closed the gap on the Ravens a little bit with the addition of Owusu Koramoah and some of these guys. But the Ravens, being the Ravens, they had a very Baltimore offseason. They were very solid. They improved. You have J.K. Dobbins that's going to be taking the reins on running back this year. They drafted the receivers to, kind of help add some speed and to help out Lamar. So, they added linemen to replace Brown and some of these guys. It was just a very, very, they drafted deep into the draft. They drafted talent. So we'll see how it pans out. I think the Ravens got better. I think the Browns got better. Overall, I think the Steelers got worse. I think the Bengals got better. It's a very competitive division. It's going to be a fun season, an exciting season. So we'll see how it all plays out. So I want to thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe for future content. Let me know in the comments below what you think I got right, what you think I got wrong. Let me know what you think. And until the next one, everybody, thanks for watching. Stay safe.